What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the channel. So if you would, before we get started, hit that button right there. I would greatly appreciate it. It helps the algorithm to ram my stuff down people's throats. The ramming is what I need to grow as a channel. And we're going to talk a little bit about Conor McGregor. And this is going to be one of those that it's going to segue multiple times into different topics. This is going to be one of those that's really going to be hard to stay pinpoint, laser focused on one specific aspect, because Conor and his career right now and what he may do next and the different options that he has available to him are so vast and so out there that I don't think anybody knows. I mean, supposed to fight, Michael Chandler. Conor got injured, so he didn't take the fight with Chandler. Next thing you know, Michael Chandler takes another fight because he's tired of waiting. And Conor got, well, then he goes and Chandler gets his ass kicked and looks like a novice against Oliveira. Next thing you know, he's calling out Conor again after that fight. And then the week following that, now Conor's talking about taking an exhibition match with Logan Paul. What the hell's going on here? Okay, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. So first, let's start with this. On Tuesday, McGregor shocked the world when he took to X, formerly known as Twitter, and revealed he's in preliminary agreements for his comeback bout. The former dual-weight UFC champ claimed that he will be taking a boxing exhibition match against YouTuber turned WWE star Logan Paul, who thought he was on the very verge of knocking out Floyd Mayweather when they clashed 3 years ago. All right, let me say this. One thing we know for sure, Conor has 2 fights left on his UFC contract. Okay? Now, we don't know exactly when he signed this contract, but it was would have been sometime maybe around 2020, something like that. So with that, it being a 5-year contract, you're looking at Conor's sunset clause being up probably at the end of next year sometime. And he's told Ariel and has said other times that I must get these 2 fights in 2025. It's got to be 2025. It's the promised land, he said. There's a video of him actually saying that.
2 fights left, though. Do you think you get those 2 fights in 2025?
I must. It's the promised lands, so we'll see.
What happens after those 2 fights?
I don't even know. I don't think no one in the space knows. I'm the highest generating fighter on planet Earth right now in today's space. And what happens afterwards, I'm a free agent, I'm not so sure.
All right, thank you, Conor.
What he means by that is his sunset clause is ending either at the end of 2025 or the beginning of 2026. What that means is if those fights do not get made and the UFC is not able to cash in on Conor McGregor and gain that revenue that they planned to get off of him for his whole contract, they'll be short 2 fights, right? And one thing we do know about Dana, anytime he has ever been willing to do any sort of sideshow, any sort of co-promoting, so far it's only been with Conor. Okay? Part of that is because Conor McGregor's name itself is as big as the UFC's brand. You can ask any casual or not casual, and Conor McGregor's name is pretty much as big, if not bigger, than the UFC brand name, right? And Dana knows this, and Dana's a smart businessman. So I think what we could be looking at here is behind the scenes, Conor has sat down with either Dana. I think he's also sat down with the Amambi family that is supposedly maybe putting on this Logan Paul exhibition match. He's probably sat down with Turki Al-Sheikh. Obviously, he's in partnership with the BKFC with David Feldman. Conor has sat down and spoken to quite a few people, one of those most notably being Dana. And I think he may not be interested in ever fighting MMA again, if I'm being completely honest with you. The sport has changed quite a bit, okay? And now you have this crossover influencer sort of boxing scene where you can go in and with a name like Conor's, you can go in and make millions and millions and millions of dollars based on your name's value doing something like an exhibition boxing match against a WWE star, Logan Paul. Okay? Now, I think behind the scenes, Dana may be willing to cross promote something like that because you got WWE and then you got UFC. Both of them are under the mother banner of TKO. Okay, so if it is going to happen, the cross promotion, you could see it possibly happening there. Okay, and Dana realizes what kind of name Conor has, but they absolutely want to get their money's worth when it comes to Conor, right? And I think what Conor is looking at as a 36-year-old man is I've done it all in the sport. I was the first ever double weight champion in the UFC, right? Nobody will ever have a bigger name than Conor McGregor that is associated with the UFC. No one currently does, or no one to date has. I'm not saying in the future there won't be someone else, but Conor will always be the first megastar for MMA, right? And I think that behind the scenes, Conor has sat down with Dana. I'm going to show you a video real quick where, and this is an older video. I don't mean to pass this off as some breaking new news or something like this. This video was, earlier this year, but you can tell by Dana's response here that he doesn't really know. He doesn't really know if Conor's interested in fighting again. Now, a lot of people think, oh, well, the UFC is the one that lays down the gauntlet. They're the ones that make the final decisions. It's never the fighters. That's true in most cases. But when you're dealing with a name like Conor McGregor that is world famous, worldwide, remember what I said earlier, his name is as big as the brand UFC, if not bigger. When you're dealing with someone like that, there are times you have to make concessions based on what it is they want. He had the severe leg break, and there's other aspects of it that Conor knows that he can monetize his name in way bigger ways than any kind of cut that he would get fighting for the UFC. Okay? Dana knows that too. And you got the part ownership in BKFC. He could go in there to BKFC, fight one time, and BKFC would get more pay-per-views and probably pay Conor more than he ever made with the UFC. And then he would be getting that money on the back end as well for being part owner. Okay? Dana's a smart businessman. Dana knows all this. So let's look at this video real quick where Dana talks about, well, Conor's got a shit ton of money. I don't know if he'll ever fight again. All right, so check it out.
With regard to Conor McGregor, what is the holdup with his return?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, the Ultimate Fighter was over back in August, and I can't imagine the plan was for him to be out as long as he's been.
Well, the first problem was that he broke that shin bone. He was recovering from that. That was one of the reasons we had it on. The other problem is he's fucking rich. Conor McGregor doesn't need money.
So are we at a point here where Conor McGregor may never fight for the UFC? Can you say that?
If you had shitloads of money, would you be sitting here right now asking me this fucking question?
No.
No, you would not. That just answered your question.
Well, I answered no. So you're saying there's a chance that Conor McGregor will not fight again for the UFC?
I don't know. Conor McGregor's got a lot of money, and anytime we get Conor, we'll be happy to, be thrilled when he comes and fights. But money complicates a lot of things. He just filmed a movie. He's got to do the press for the movie, and he's got obligations with that. And he does want to fight this year, but we'll see what happens.
All right. Several things he said there is notable. Again, this video's from a while ago, but Dana clearly said right there, I don't know. I don't know if he'll ever fight again or not. And the reporter tries to put him under the gun, but because Dana made the comment, if you had the kind of effing money that Conor has, would you be sitting right here right now asking me these questions? The reporter clearly is like, no. And he's like, well, you answered your own question. He was like, yeah, but I said no. So are you telling me that it's likely Conor will not fight again, right? And Dana's like, I don't know. With money complicates a lot of things, changes a lot of things. Obviously, this is back when the Roadhouse movie was being made. Conor had other obligations as far as media is concerned for that. So, obviously they've spoken since then, but date it back, guys. You can look at this relationship between Conor and Dana, and you can see even way back then, Dana's not really sure. He's not really sure. And they can't make him fight. Granted, they have him under contract, right? But this thing coming up with Logan Paul that he's talking about, this is an exhibition. So this is one of those things that I'm pretty sure, and I haven't vetted this claim, but I'm pretty sure he can do something like an exhibition when it's not a professional fight that goes on his record. I'm pretty sure he can do that outside of having a current UFC contract. How could he? I mean, he's not going behind Dana's back and doing this, right? Obviously, it's not a breach of his contract to go and do some sort of exhibition, huge paying exhibition fight with Logan Paul. Okay. So I think Dana and company have gotten to a point with Conor where they're like, okay, Conor is different in the sense that the UFC typically wants to devalue guys before sending them on their way. Okay? I don't believe they want to do that with Conor. I think Dana is seeing some value in maybe getting in a cross-promotional sort of relationship with Conor and being open to maybe cross-promoting like a BKFC, cross-promoting, vet and bill it as, UFC against BKFC and Conor being the UFC guy, which, I mean, just think about the dynamics behind that. He's a part owner of BKFC. So he goes in there and makes that huge. Then he gets paid all this money on the back end. And then Dana gets to get his revenue out of it. I think Conor has behind the scenes sat down with Dana, and he is not sure if he wants to go back into the UFC and fight MMA anymore, have guys throwing full steam kicks at him throwing full steam kicks back. I think he's expressed a concern about that. And I think he's also sitting to the side looking at these Jake Paul, Mike Tyson circus shows and, the Anderson Silva, Jake Paul and Mike Perry and Jake Paul and, freaking Logan Paul, who outweighs Mayweather by 70 pounds, going in there and having an exhibition with it. I mean, and they're making cheddar off of this. Not to mention, Conor's the one that kind of started all of that off with Mayweather, back in 2017, right? 2017, when he went up against Mayweather. I mean, he made the biggest payday of his life. Conor did when he took that fight. So I think he's looking at this, and Dana is starting to make some concessions and getting to a point where he's like, well, you know what? If you can't beat him, join him, right? And if Conor's not interested in taking some of these fights, like the Michael Chandler fight, some of these other fights, which I think Chandler's performance against Oliveira the other week, I think hurt his ability to be able to get a shot with Conor McGregor now, if I'm being honest with you. He didn't look great. A lot of people are looking at it as Oliveira made him look bad. And that's true. I think Oliveira's the man, but I also think it was a mix of Michael Chandler sitting out for 2 years, jock sniffing Conor, hoping to get that Conor fight, right? And I just don't think he was prepared when he went in there. But with all of that said, I think we're getting to a point where it's a tipping point for Dana, a tipping point for Conor. And I think that Turkey Al-Sheikh maybe has spoken with Dana. I think Dana has had meetings with David Feldman. He's definitely had meetings with Conor in the background. And I think Dana is opening his mind and opening his pocket to the idea of co-promoting a few events, whether it be, obviously the Logan Paul situation, that's with Ambani family. The guy's worth, I think, $19 billion and some change. I looked it up the other day. I was like, what? So I don't know, if Dana necessarily has anything to do with him, but I do know that he's talked to and met with Turkey Al-Sheikh. So you look at that, and then you look at these talks with Logan Paul, Conor McGregor, which obviously they will make tons of money. I want someone to explain to me why Conor breaks his little toe, refuses to get in there with Michael Chandler as a result of a little broken toe. Chandler goes in, gets his ass beat by Charles Oliveira, and then no sooner than a week after Chandler has that fight, now Conor's going public saying that he's in the preliminary stages of an exhibition boxing match with Logan Paul. This, to me, sounds like a guy who is not interested in coming back to MMA, where all of these killers are and where he could potentially crack his other leg in half and then get maimed and, and inhibit his ability to be able to go into any fight sport, right? I don't think he wants to risk it. And I think he's looking to go into something that doesn't require kicking, all right? Logan Paul, Conor McGregor boxing match fits that bill. Okay, there's no kicking in boxing, right? And the thing also with BKFC and David Feldman, this is one of those things where imagine you have a house that's worth $200,000. Okay, let's say you have $100,000 equity in that home. Well, let's say someone just out of the goodness of their heart comes in and upgrades the shit out of your house to a point where an appraiser comes in after the fact and says, I value this house at $500,000, right? Well, you've still only paid $100,000 of your own money in that home, but now the equity you have in it immediately goes from $100,000 to $400,000. Because if you sold the home now, you're going to get the difference, right? I think that's what we're looking at here with the BKFC, Conor McGregor. He goes in there, takes part ownership. Well, as big as his name is, if he goes in there and has this huge fight, this huge pay-per-view build event with BKFC, they're obviously going to pay him handsomely just to step in there with someone and throw hands with no gloves on, right? No kicking. No kicking. I don't think Conor minds cuts. He's got good hands. He's always had, decent boxing in terms of MMA guys. And then on top of that, after BKFC goes through the roof because they've now had the biggest name in combat sports fight on one of their cards, he's going to get money, being Conor, will get money on the back end of that as well. Okay, so I think that there are some things going on in the background that possibly could indicate that Conor is looking to just ride out his UFC career to the point where his sunset clause takes over and he doesn't have to step back in that ring, or in that octagon, rather. I think we could be seeing that. I have reasons to believe it. One of them being the Logan Conor McGregor situation. The second one being his, the way he set up this partnership with BKFC. That's him being a smart businessman. That's him looking to his future. If you remember years ago, there was during the Floyd Mayweather Conor days, there was actually a reporter that asked Dana White in one of the post press conferences, we're hearing rumors that Conor is part owner in the UFC now, that he's bought stock in it as part owner of the UFC. Is that true? And Dana kind of laughed it off and was like, no, he's making so much fucking money, he should be part owner, is basically what he said. And that may not be verbatim, but that's pretty much what he said, right? I think that Conor approached them, Dana and the rest of the crew back in the day, that he tried to become part owner in the UFC. UFC's not set up that way. They weren't about to let one of the fighters become part owner. I think at that point, they were already big enough to where they didn't need that. The only back that would have scratched would have been Conor's. It wouldn't have really scratched Dana's. But this BKFC situation and David Feldman is a completely different situation. they're not nearly as big as the UFC. You have to consider too, Dana is not going to co-promote something with somebody like the PFL because they are his direct MMA competition. BKFC is not MMA. It's not MMA. It's not boxing either. It's somewhere in between, right? So they're not, as far as sport goes, BKFC is not Dana's direct competition. So I think that behind the scenes, Conor has expressed to Dana that he may not be interested in going back to the UFC and fighting in the UFC. I think he may have said that verbatim. All right. And that's been the reason for these, roundabout answers that Dana keeps giving. Oh, no, and then when they ask Conor, oh, my job is to just be ready, and it's the promised land, the promised land. You know what the promised land is biblically? That's arriving to the land of milk and honey. That's arriving to the place where you can be the most comfortable. You can be the most successful. Okay. And for Conor, that is free agency. All right. Conor's name is so big that he outgrew the UFC a while back. And his name is so big that there is no way that he could make as much money fighting under the UFC banner as he could make fighting under Conor McGregor's banner, under his own name, over some deal that he can work out with Logan Paul in a boxing match, whatever it is. Conor doesn't need the UFC other than the fact that he still has a couple of fights on his contract. Okay, that's a legal binding document there. Okay, but at the same time, they can't make Conor, they can't force Conor to take any of these fights. He knows this. Conor knows this. His sunset clause in the end of his contract is quickly approaching. Okay? And Dana, although he's a cutthroat businessman, he understands that not burning bridges with Conor is a smart move. Okay? Dana understands this. He's not going to do that, right? So I think what we're seeing is a willingness of Dana to possibly co-promote some other things with Conor, right? And then when they get the revenue from whatever those things are, whether it be, co-promoting a boxing match, an exhibition boxing match, co-promoting something with BKFC, whatever, when Dana and them feel confident that they've gotten the revenue from that they would have gotten of his last two fights in the UFC, then maybe they're just okay with washing their hands of Conor as far as his contract, because I can tell you now, Conor's not re-signing with the UFC. They can't afford him. They won't afford him. Okay? Now, I'm not saying he won't always be treated as royalty there, and he won't still be at the fights, that he won't still be online chirping this and that and the other, that he and Dana won't do business together in the future. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, as far as being a fighter and signing a fighter's contract, nah, Conor's not re-signing with the UFC, because if Nate Diaz refused to sign because he knew he could make more money outside of the UFC, outside of their banner, outside of the monetary control that they had over him. If Francis Ngannou had the same thoughts, you can best believe that the biggest star in fights sports understands and conceptually realizes that he's worth more if he is not under a UFC contract. But you know who understands that just as good as Conor does? Yep, Dana. Dana understands that. Dana understands that Conor understands that. Okay? So Dana would be a fool to try to force Conor's hand to do this, that, or the third. The best thing he can do is just be along for the ride. Just like he said in the video, anytime we can get Conor in, it was great. We're happy to have him, Yeah, damn right you are. Because anytime he fights, you're getting a cut of the massive paydays and the massive attention and the massive numbers that he does as the biggest star in fight sports. So damn right you're happy whenever he comes around, right? But Dana's not going to force the issue. He's not going to play hardball with somebody like Conor, like he did with Francis Ngannou, right? And like he kind of almost did a little bit with Nate Diaz a few times, right? He's not going to do it with Conor. So there's a few things that I think could be going on here. But, you know, and I know this video is a little bit all over the place, but I have so many thoughts going because none of us really know for sure exactly what's happening behind closed doors. But these are just some thoughts that I have. So let me know what you guys think. I know a lot of you have already expressed you don't think Conor's ever going to fight again. For the UFC, anyway, for the UFC. And I don't necessarily disagree, but as far as him having 2 fights left on his contract, what do you guys think? You know, how is the UFC going to proceed here? Who's going to be involved in the end of his career? You know, how is this last leg of his 2-fight UFC contract and this last leg of his semi-prime career? I mean, I know he's already effed off through most of his prime. I get that. But he's 36, you know, 36, 37, 38 before up until the time he turns 40. What is that going to look like? What is that going to look like? You know, you guys let me know in the comments. Like the video if you would. Please do subscribe to the channel. That really helps a lot. And I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.